So we're looking up minimum wage and minimum wage in 1971. So what are we? What is that?
55 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah, 54 years ago.
Yeah.
Not that long ago. I mean, longer than I've been on the planet. But let me read this here. This is another X post. So
this all comes from a post I saw a while ago that we couldn't find, but they were breaking it down that the relative minimum wage it was in the like 1970-ish area is relatively equal to $56 an hour today.
Isn't it kind of weird what kind of happened there in around that time period where we did something? Well, not we, but they did something with the dollar back then where they knocked it right off the gold standard and started. That's when money didn't really mean anything anymore, and hyperinflation and all this fucking bullshit started happening. So, but listen to this. This is great. This is great news for you if you're a time traveler and you can go back to 1971. In 1971, minimum wage was $1.60 an hour, meaning a supermarket clerk could purchase $7 or 7.25 or 7.28 ounces of gold every month working 40 hours, equivalent today with $19,445. So, yeah, here's the calculation.
Like $250,000 a year.
1971 minimum wage, $1.60 an hour. Weekly earnings, 40-hour week, $1.60 times 40, which is $64 a week. Monthly earnings, 4 weeks, 64 times 4, which is actually, you're rounding down because it's a little bit more than that because it's more than 4 weeks, slightly. $256 per month. Gold price in 1971, $35 an ounce. Wow. Ounces per month, 256 divided by 35 equals 7.31 ounces. Gold price today in 2025, $2,660 an ounce. Value today, 7.31 times 2660 equals 19,445 a month. So that's where they get that 19,000.
It also means if you bought gold all through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, you'd be doing okay.
Rich motherfucker, maybe. Maybe you have enough net worth for that guy's ex to be with you. Just saying. And she's one of those 6,000 unicorns, so you want that. The 1971 minimum wage of $1.60 per hour yields $64. Okay, well, it's going over the same bullshit again. That's fucking nuts, man.
Yeah.
Honestly, so.
But the crazy thing is too, the dumb people hear this stuff and they'll say, so the minimum wage should be $56 an hour. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
These are the people who think the food comes from the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a.
Hold on a second. It doesn't?
Yeah. That's where it comes from.
I thought that's where they make it.
That's where they make the
food.
They
just make the food at the grocery store. Where else would they make it?
But really, they've just been siphoning value and destroying the economy. And it's just been slowly getting worse and worse and worse. And people have been comfortable enough all throughout it to not really notice. But then when you put your head up in 2025 and you realize if you worked minimum wage in 1970-ish, you were making the equivalent.
You could live.
I mean, you could buy the equivalent of $250,000 of gold per year today.
I'm actually curious to see something here. Let's see something real quick here. What does in 1971 average vehicle price?
Oh, probably like $2,000.
I'm gonna say about $2,000.
We're talking.
Oh no, $3,900
for a new car. Yeah.
Yeah. So $3,900 and.
Is it now 60?
No, about 35 to 40, something like that, for like an average vehicle. But okay, so let's say 4,000 for easy math. 4,000. If you're making minimum wage, you're making around $260 a month. So in the year, you're making about 2,800. No, yeah, no times 10. No, sorry, about 3,000 or so a year. So you're making. You could buy a car in like a year and a bit. So imagine if you're a minimum wage.
That's minimum wage.
You're a minimum wage kid.
Our minimum wage now is something like, what is it, like 28 or something at 40 hours a week, 1,000 a year?
No, it's not that much. Or maybe it is actually. No, you're right. No, you're right. I think you are right.
It's different.
It's about where we're at. We're about 17 an hour, I think.
Yeah, and that's in Canada, and then in California.
Yeah, so it's about 34,000.
But there are other places in the States where it's like $7 an hour.
My point is, if you were a kid back then, you could work a minimum wage job and you could buy a car in like a year, roughly.
Also, what was
I
the
guess now
average
technically you kind of could now, which is weird.
for
Now that I'm thinking about
minimum
that.
wage?
Well, because if you're
You could
making,
buy a car, but you wouldn't get a new one.
no, you
If
could.
if your income was
No, it actually relates. It actually relates, but the problem is that everything else doesn't relate. So, because if you do the math, I just kind of did it in my head. If you do the math, and it's about $34,000 where we are. So not maybe where you are. $34,000 a year to working full time at minimum wage, a minimum wage job. And the average car, like I've been looking up Toyota Rav4s because I might buy one. You can get one for around 42,000 or something. So 42 grand for that, 34,000 minimum wage job. It's basically almost the same as this, like in relation to that, because you're around 3,000 a year here, and it's about $4,000 to buy a car. So it pretty much relates that way, where everything else doesn't relate.
yeah.
Everything else has gone hyper.
How much is your grocery? Your TVs are cheaper.
Yeah.
I bet you you were spending like $1,000 on a TV in 70, maybe 2,000
Yeah, probably.
on a without like getting like the super cheap. Now you get like a really good one for $400.
Yeah, true.
Maybe less. Probably used $200. Go pick it up from some guy.
So it's funny
But-
how
Yeah,
certain things.
what's the relative cost of housing?
That's
just
it.
to buy a house.
Yeah.
What's your rent cost? What are your utilities cost? What's your grocery bill every month? How much is your gas bill when you're driving that car? Right,
Yeah.
like all of these things.
Well, actually, that's what I should have looked up right there was the average home price. But it's hard to do that.
1970, I think it was like 15,000 or 10,000.
I don't know how it's going to come up with this number because it's
Probably
It's-
the same as it. How it
So
comes
here
up
we
in the
go.
car.
So we're going to use Toronto because that's fairly
That's
local
pretty
to us.
close.
So the average price of a house in Toronto was approximately $30,000.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, my grandparents bought a whole farm for like 50,000 in 72.
Yeah, but so okay, so do the math on this now. So if the average price for a house in Toronto was $30,000 and a minimum wage job, you can make around $3,000 for easy math, $3,000 a year. It's about 10 years of your income at minimum wage. Right now, it's probably
It'd be 20.
it's
You might get halfway there, right? You might
well,
get
at a
10
minimum
years.
wage job.
10 years.
You
might
wouldn't
get
even
you
get that
close to
because the average
300.
house in Toronto now is probably
Oh,
let
in
me see.
Toronto, it might
Yeah.
be 600-700.
So 20,
I'm thinking
25.
at like 500 if you assume the average at 500. It's gonna use a different place.
It says
No, it's
Canadian
just the
average
average
house
Canadian.
price
It's gonna be higher in Toronto than
in
that
Toronto. I know that's what I'm saying.
though. At 6 whatever.
So
it was.
we're going to compare apples to apples. So 1.1 million.
Jeez. Yeah.
So there you go. So if you look at that now, so it was 10 times what you made minimum wage to be able to buy a home, the average home. Now it's
Yeah.
about 30 times.
Yeah, and it's also like the your paycheck, right? What percentage of your paycheck is like the best case scenario for rent or something in
Right.
1970, right? Like even when you were renting in early 2000s, what did you say? You were working a normal job. weren't- you
My
weren't-
rent was
But you said
about 550
I think
bucks
you were
or
saying
600
you had
bucks.
something
I had a
like
2-bedroom apartment.
yeah, but you said something like your one check, your 2 weeks pay, pretty much had you on on your necessary.
Oh yeah, it would pretty much cover my bills. It was like pretty close.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably like a pay and a half, essentially, max.
Yeah,
But yeah.
necessary though.
Yeah, and that's because like my car insurance sucked and and all that. But realistically, like my living expenses, as far as like rent, utilities, groceries, all that, under $1,000.
Yeah, and that's just living normally, and that's in
Yeah.
the 2000s, like compared
Yeah.
to today.
And I was making at that time, I was making around
Maybe,
50.
like 4 roommates before you can have
Yeah.
that.
I was making like 50 grand a year at that time, so I had money coming out of my asshole. I'm like in my 20s, and I get money coming out.
That
of
was
my
like
ass.
just that wasn't like a specialty anything. Like that was kind of as long as you kind of were willing to work for it, you could go and find a job to make that kind of money, right? So like, because you can
Right.
say that about anything. You could get a job today where you're making really good money, making $300,000 a year, but it's like, what did you have to do to qualify for that job? It's not just a job that's available, and so long as you're willing to do the work and you show up, you can get to that point.
Yeah.
which was a way more the case back then.
Yeah. Well, that's the big change. That's the big difference right there.
It's nuts.